Hello and welcome back to another week of Sambo iRacing. So you've graduated from the V or the Formula Ford and now you're looking at your first taste of the Formula 4. It's fast, it's twitchy, and it's your first real experience of downforce on iRacing. If you're anything like me, you'll spin at least 3 times in your outlap. So to try and save you some time and some embarrassment, here are my top 13 tips to actually drive the Formula 4 properly and maybe even gain some iRating along the way. My favourite's tip 10. Let me know in the comments which yours is. Let's go. Tip 1. Survive the start. Having come from the Formula V or the Formula Ford, the F4 is far more dangerous in terms of starts. It's not so hard to get away from the line, but in terms of turn 1, that's where the carnage generally happens. So if you're on the outside like I am, give plenty of room to the inside. If you were starting on the inside and you can't get out there, do be aware that cars will often throw it up the inside trying to find positions early on. It's best just for the first couple of turns, give loads of room on your inside, let anybody wipe themselves out, and then once the field starts thinning out and you can find positions where opportunities arise, go for them as I did right here. But it's a very, very fragile car. What you're looking to do is make sure you're still in one piece and facing the right direction at the end of lap 1, and that's when you can really start going for positions. You can't win it in lap 1, but you can certainly lose it. Tip number 2, consistency beats hot laps. It's often tempting to chase that one perfect lap, but in actual races, consistency is what counts. 10 laps within a few tenths of each other will almost always put you ahead of someone who's quick one lap but messy the next, or cell spins like this poor guy does at turn 1. If you know you can hit your marks lap after lap, you're also going to be much harder to force into a mistake, and that'll help reduce pressure on you in wheel-to-wheel racing. A good way to try and train for this is by setting yourself a goal of 10 consecutive clean laps in practice, aiming to keep the lap delta within a few tenths. The discipline of consistency pays off not only in safety rating but in iRating and race results. These clips that I'm showing you now all happened within 2 laps of the start of a top split 2.7k strength of field race. If these guys are doing it in top split, you've got every chance of improving your positions in any race below that. Tip number 3, brake bias. So it's another thing that you'll want to understand early on in the Formula 4. It controls how the braking force is split between the front and the rear tyres. If you push it forward, i.e. raise the number, then more of the braking force is done by the front wheels. If you pull it back, more of it is done by the rears. So with a higher front brake bias, the car feels more stable under braking, but you may struggle to rotate it into corners. However, with more rear bias, the car rotates better, but you also run the risk of rear lockups, which is like putting a handbrake on, and especially in the slower corners where aero isn't helping. The fixed F4 setup gives you a very safe starting point, but you can still adjust brake bias during a session. A good rule of thumb is push it forward for long, faster corners where you need stability, or bring it back a click or two if you have any tighter corners coming up where rotation is more important. In these relatively extreme examples I'm going to show you now I'm going to show you coming into turn 1 at Monza with brake bias at full forward at 62%. So as you see, I go for the brake and I instantly lock up. Doesn't matter what I do to the front wheels, it's like having 4 blocks of rubber that aren't actually attached to the ground. You just lock up. Alternatively, if you go fully rearward, you have the opposite happens. Once we start applying the brakes and try and turn, it's like someone's just pulled a handbrake in the car. And as you see, as soon as I turn, the car just turns around and I've got no chance. What you need to do is find the right level for the track and for the corners that are coming up and for your braking style. So if you're an early braker, you can get away with more front brake bias. If you like to absolutely go on the threshold, I ran it at 54% for this, and it means that I can get the car rotated, turn in, make the corner, and everyone's happy. So try it, experiment for yourself, and know that it's not necessarily going to be the same brake bias that you run for the F4 in every single combination of car and track. And also, it doesn't matter what I choose in a track guide, that doesn't necessarily mean that one will be right for you. Tip number 4, trail braking for rotation. So one of the biggest differences you'll feel stepping into the F4, and now that you've got aero, is how it responds to trail braking. So if you simply brake in a straight line, then release and turn, the front end will wash wide and you'll end up fighting understeer into the corner. By carrying a small amount of brake pressure beyond the turn-in, you keep your weight on the front tyres, which really helps the nose dig in and you get the rear to rotate around. The trick is subtlety. You don't want to drag half your brake pedal in, just a light touch to help the car rotate. Spend some time in practicing focusing only on this technique, because once you get it, your corner entry speed is going to be improved massively and your results are going to see commensurate value. For a more in-depth take on trail braking, check out my 25 sim racing beginners tips, where I go into a little bit more detail on trail braking. Tip 5, straighten out before you apply the full throttle. So corner exits are where most drivers either gain or lose huge chunks of time. The F4 really rewards patience. If you roll onto the throttle whilst you're still holding steering lock, the car will either understeer wide or snap into a spin. The safest approach is to wait until the steering wheel is close to straight and then smoothly add throttle. It can feel like you're giving away time, but in reality you're gaining more speed down the following straight and you're reducing the risk of incidents. If you're unsure, practice a few laps to focus only on your exits. Ease off early, prioritize getting the car pointed straight, and then accelerate hard. You'll notice consistency improves almost immediately, and your race results will, as well as you'll have less self-spins. Right, next tip, active reset point. Now this is so important. So many people don't know about it, but when we are out of the car, we can go to settings up in the top right. Then we are going to scroll all the way down until we see advanced analysis. Now we're going to ignore the custom sectors, but we're going to do active reset. So to set a start point, click that button and then assign a button on your wheel. To reset, again, we click that button, choose another one. We do apply and close. And now once we are in a test session, and obviously test sessions only, we can set an active reset point. Now, I do it when I'm doing my track guides just before I get to the start-finish point, but if you've got a corner that you're really struggling with, and let's say it's this one coming up here, so just before I get into it, I'm going to press the button now, and now if I cock up the corner, which is very easily doable, rather than having to go back to the pits, get a new car or anything like that, yes, I have lost some power. I can just press the active reset button, and here we go again. This time I make it. Brilliant. So what I can now do is move that onto the next corner or wherever I want and hit a new active reset button or point. And now if I want to go back there, I'll press that button again, and as you can see, I'm back here. Absolute game changer. Try it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. Tip 7, use the whole track. Now, lap time in the F4 often comes down to how much track you're willing and allowed to use. iRacing's off-track system can often feel harsh, but it is consistent. If you take your time to learn where those limits are, you can push right to the edge without picking up incidents, using all of the curb on corner entry or running the car out to the very edge on exit. It might only be worth a tenth of a second in one corner, but over a lap, those tenths add up. In official races, it also means you avoid unnecessary penalties. It's worth doing in a practice session over and over again, where you deliberately test each curb and exit to see what is and isn't allowed. Once you know, you can drive with confidence, and I can guarantee you the guys setting the fastest lap times every week are using every inch of available track allowed to them. Tip 8, understand the aero window. So the defining feature of the F4 compared to the cars that you've been driving in rookies comes down to the downforce. At higher speeds, the wings really push the car into the track. That means you can carry far more speed through the fast corners than you'd normally expect. At lower speeds though, there's almost no help at all from the aero. So the car feels very mechanical and mistakes are much easier to make. Respecting the difference between the two is crucial. You can push hard through the fast sweepers, trust the grip, but be more conservative in hairpins and chicanes. Knowing which corners fall into each category on a given track will help you decide where to push and where to stay safe. A good one to practice on is Interlagos as here, where the first half of the track is almost all fast sweepers until we get into the end section here, where we're relying far more on mechanical grip and the car feels an awful lot more jittery. Tip 9, weight transfer and balance. Now, because the F4 is so light, every input that you make has a big effect on weight transfer. Braking will shift grip to the front, throttle shifts it to the rear, and steering throws it across the car. If you make those transitions suddenly, you overload one end of the car and it snaps. If you make them smoothly, the tires stay within their grip range and the car will feel more planted. Understanding this balance is one of the keys to linking corners together. Think about how one action sets up the next. Smooth braking gets you set up for a stable turn-in. A clean turn-in sets you up for a strong exit. It all flows, and once you get that rhythm, the car's going to feel much easier to control, and races will start coming towards you whilst you watch others make mistakes. Tip 10, overtaking, and this is where it gets more interesting. So overtaking in the Formula 4 is more about setup than heroics. Because the cars are so evenly matched on a fixed setup, the best way to pass is often by creating a better exit onto the following straight. That often means taking a slightly later apex, sacrificing a little time mid-corner so that you can exit with more speed. Once you're alongside, commit to a clean line and give the other driver plenty of space. Dive bombs can sometimes work, but they also end at a high percentage of racing. The percentage predictable moves are what are actually going to gain you iRating in the long run. Think about how you position your car at 2 or 3 corners ahead before making the move rather than just the braking zone. Let's have a look at a couple of passes that I made in one race. So here we are at Brands Hatch. I'm running from the back and we're coming up to turn 3. Now I get a better exit than the green car ahead. I go to the outside. He seems to be covering that. So I just take a look, see that he's run slightly wide, but he's not carrying as much speed as myself. I commit to an early line into the following corner, nice and early, signaling that I'm going to be there, and it's a nice straightforward pass. Now we're going to come up to the same corner the following lap. This time the car in front has panicked slightly. I saw him have a lockup, so I know I've got more pace than him. This time he goes to defend the inside, so I take a nice wide entry. I get on the gas ahead of him. I don't panic that he's in the way. I take a nice wide exit. Actually didn't get an off track there because there's plenty of room on the outside. Now I've not got the pass completed, so I give plenty of room around the next corner. Again, exit nice and wide. And this is where you really have to concentrate. So we're side by side at this point. I keep my foot fully in the throttle, and that's when you then have to really concentrate and nail the next couple of corners. He tries to feint to my inside, but it's a corner that really doesn't have any braking, so I know he's not going to have the speed to overpass me. I've already got a little distance on him. Nail the following corner, and I can see him disappearing, and I can stop worrying about defending and start thinking about going on the attack again. This next sort of overtake is one of my favourites, although it does feel a little bit mean. It is the mind punt. So I've got no intention of actually trying to overtake this car on the inside. However, he's aware that I'm there. I'm going to feint to go to the inside, and I just make him miss his braking marker. I then return back to the normal line, make the corner absolutely fine. He runs off into the gravel. I don't get any X's, and I've not had to commit or lose anything to make the pass. Felt a bit sorry for him, but that's racing. Another favourite tactic is when you've got 2 cars squabbling ahead of you, you know that one or both of them are going to have a terrible exit, so make sure you get nice and wide on entry, keep an eye to see what's going on, and choose the path that they both don't go. Sometimes it can lead to a nice double overtake without you having to do too much work into the process. Whilst we're talking about overtakes, be aware, tip 11, the vortex of danger. What you need to watch out for is if you're not alongside someone going into the passing zone, there is a good chance that he won't see you in his mirrors, and then through no fault of your own, he's going to move back to his line and your race is going to be ruined. So just be aware of that to ensure an overtake doesn't cost you your race. Tip 12, smooth inputs. So precision and smoothness are what separates a messy lap from a quick one in the Formula 4. If your steering inputs are big and reactive, you'll constantly be outside the tyre's ideal slip angle. If your inputs are small and progressive, you keep the car balanced and the tyres happy. The same goes for throttle and brake. Think about your hands and feet as if they're connected by a string. Every action should flow into the next. A good drill is to do a session where you deliberately exaggerate smoothness, even if it feels slower. When you look at the lap times, you'll often find you've actually become quicker because you're not fighting the car anymore. This is the reason why when people stop concentrating on what they're doing because they're having a chat with someone on Discord, they'll often say, oh wow, I've just set a personal best lap. All about smoothness, it is key. And that brings me to the final tip. So it's often said that discretion is the better part of valor, and that's something that you have to take into consideration in the F4. In this lap that I'm showing you now, it's the final lap of a race where I started from the back and the 3 guys ahead of me are in the podium positions. The guy who's leading the race is a 4K iRating. he had a little off in turn 1. He did save it quite brilliantly, but now I have basically 10 turns to try and get a podium to make some what would have been relatively good content, or so I thought anyway. But he was defending really well and there was no obvious opportunity to attack. Here I'm looking at the inside, he decides to defend that. There's no real place for me to go to the inside of him here, so I try and hang it around the outside, which maybe I could have done if he was 1500 or less than that, but no, he positioned his car absolutely fine. So I try and do the mine punt on him. He's having none of it. He doesn't think I'm going to make that move. Absolutely fair enough. Now I'm running out of corners. I've only got sort of 4 left. So I try and get as tight to him as possible. He sort of parks it on the apex, which is brilliant because it makes me get off the throttle. Now I'm down to 2 corners. Now I'm down to 1 corner. So what I'm going to do, I can't go up his inside into the final corner. So I go to the outside and I'm going to see if I can attempt a switchback on him. However, whilst I've done it perfectly on entry, he sees me coming, blocks that off. We're coming up to the finish line, and I just have to accept that I'm going to finish in 4th place rather than 3rd. It wasn't worth ruining both our races to make 1 position at the end. So many people forget about that in the Formula 4. It's better to take some iRating and move along. Try and beat your car number. So those are my top 13 tips that will help you get comfortable and competitive on iRacing. Now, a word of warning, I'm not an alien by any means. I don't believe that I'm the best driver on iRacing, far, far from it in fact, but anything that might help you master the basics of braking, throttle, weight transfer and smoothness will help you give you pace. Combining that with track awareness, clean overtakes and consistency will help get you the results. Stick with it and you'll find this car is one of the best training grounds for real open wheel racecraft on iRacing. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like or a subscribe, and I'll see you again next week. Also, if you want me to do this sort of video for any other car, let me know in the comments.